everyone. Thank you for coming. Sorry for our technical difficulties, but I think we got it going now in an old-fashioned sort of way, but that's good. That works. My name is Felicia Ortner. I'm a Master Wildlife Conservationist for the state, which is just it's a volunteer program, and most of what we do is outreach programs. I usually only do bears. Bears are my specialty. I've been studying about bears for over 30 years now. Kind of as a hobby. I don't do anything professionally with it. So, and after so many years, I decided let's share some of this information that you have gotten all these years. Usually I see that with humans, with us, we have a tendency to not like or to be afraid of, to want to get rid of things that we don't know about, things we don't understand, things that are different. But once we get a little bit of knowledge and we understand a little bit about things, why they do what they do, generally we're a lot more accepting of that and we have a lot more tolerance. So hopefully that's what I can do. I can introduce you to a little more information about bears, so you feel a little more familiar with them, get a little more idea of what goes on with them, and then hopefully that'll help you be a little more tolerant. So the presentation is about 50 minutes. And then afterwards we can have questions and answers. I just ask you to hold all your questions till the end, please. So, sorry, I'm still panting from running. Throughout human history, humans have been fascinated with many animals. Many creatures in the animal kingdom. One of the ones that has fascinated us the most are bears. Bears throughout the world. We've always seen bears as a sign of power, a sign of strength, of majesty, even deity. We put them in our legends, in our myths. We put them in our heavens. One of the most recognized grouping of stars in the northern hemisphere here is the Big Dipper, and really we can see this grouping of stars on any clear night from this area. This is actually part of the third largest constellation in the sky, which is Ursa Major, or the Great Bear. Of course, Hollywood's done a wonderful job of making them the villains and the bad guys in the movies. Also, we have other media that helps with this idea. This is actually from part of a display from the North American Bear Center in Minnesota. And as you can see, it's magazine covers, recognizable, familiar covers, National Geographic, Time, Outdoor Life, and they all have these ferocious looking bears on it, baring their teeth, so they're showing you all that mean power that they have, that fierceness. But every single bear on every single one of these covers, including National Geographic, is a Hollywood bear. They're actors. And those bears, these are the same bears. Okay? These are the same bears with their trainers, obviously. And they actually have to be taught to bare their teeth like that. Almost every mount that you see, every picture, always shows these bears with this growl, this baring their teeth. Bears don't do that naturally. That's something their trainers have to teach them. The bears in the wild don't actually do that. So often, too, in the movies, when you see two bears fighting or a bear fighting with something, you hear this terrible growling. Often when bears fight, they're actually quiet. And all that growling is an overdub of usually a dog or a wolf growling. So, but that means Hollywood is doing their job. They're entertaining us. course, they've also been national icons and mascots. Smokey Bear's been teaching us how to prevent forest fires since the 1940s. 1903, a little shop in Brooklyn, Morris Mitchum and his wife owned a little store, and she made these stuffed animals that were that resembled bears. And because of a story that had gone around the previous year about the President of the United States on a hunting trip with the Mississippi governor, Morris asked the president if he could use his name. The president said yes, and thus we have the teddy bears. Okay, and originally they were called Teddy's bears, and they were actually used by Theodore Roosevelt during his re-election campaign. So that's how we got the teddy bears. And of course, Morris Mitchum went on to form the Ideal Toy Company. Bears, they're not really these cuddly toys that we want to hug, but they're also not these ferocious beasts that we have to just be so fearful of. They're our closest relative here in North America. They're a large mammal found on 4 continents within the world. Their muscle and their bone structure is most like ours of any other animal that's native here in North America. Even though we've been fascinated with these creatures for so long, the majority of the bear species in the world, existing in the world today, are vanishing. They're facing a growing number of threats: encroachment and loss of habitat, illegal hunting and poaching, and a misunderstood fear, which can lead to unnecessary killing. Just a quick introduction to the 8 existing species we have today. Over here in North America, we have the American black bear. That's the same bear that we have right here in Connecticut in the wild. The black bear can be found throughout North America, Canada, US, and northern Mexico. Along the Arctic Circle, we have the polar bear. Around in North America and Asia and little parts of Europe. The widespread bear that's on the most continents is the brown bear, sometimes referred to as the grizzly bear. It can be found here in North America, in Europe, and in Asia. The Asiatic black bear, found obviously in Asia, on that southeast area in Asia. The sloth bear, found in Sri Lanka and India. The sun bear, which is found in Malaysia, around here, in Malaysia, Southeast Asia. Of course, the giant panda, only found in China. And over in South America, one little bear species exists that's called the Andean bear, named after the fact that it's in the Andean mountains range. Now, if you are looking online, sometimes in books, you might see this particular species with a name called spectacle bears. Spectacle, like in old-fashioned glasses. Probably about 15, 20 years ago now, they changed it. That used to be its familiar name. They changed it to be the Andean mountains to represent where it's from. Now, of all these 8 species in the world, only 2 of them actually have decent numbers. The black bear that's here in North America, that's here in Connecticut, their numbers are very good, they're very stable. And the brown bear, their numbers here in North America are also fairly good. They've been protected for many years, and they've made a comeback. Every other species that you see is is either listed as threatened, vulnerable, endangered, and in the wild, their numbers are very, very small. Bears have been evolving for about 40 million years. The first true known bear is the dawn bear. About 20 million years ago was the dawn bear. From that bear, in evolution, all of the species of today have descended. Here in North America, during the Ice Age, we had the giant short-faced bear. This guy was huge. He could get up to 2,200 pounds. And as you can see, this is actually from a display in the Mammoth site in South Dakota. And this is representing a man that is 6 feet tall. And this is our bear standing on all 4 feet. Not standing up on his hind leg, but all 4 feet, and you can see he's about 6 feet high just at that position. So he also could run probably about 45 to 50 miles an hour, which is fast. Of course, he was huge, so he did have trouble hunting because he couldn't make the quick turns that our his prey usually does. So now he disappeared around 12,000 years ago, with a lot of the other megafauna disappearing with the change in climate and vegetation, prey, and of course humans then starting to populate North America. This is also from the Mammoth site in South Dakota. I thought this was a great display showing the skulls of many of the different bears. This is our little black bear here that we have here. Now this is Arctodocimus, the giant short-faced bear. Over here you can see just how much larger he was. Probably about 40% larger than our largest bear, which are some of the big brown bears or the polar bears. In Connecticut, prior to the 1600s, our landscape was a thick, dense forest. We had thick trees, and then we had some grasslands along the waterways, along the coastline, and some agricultural burns from American Indians, and of course lightning strikes. This supplied what was needed for our woodland wildlife: food, water, space, and shelter. Wildlife was abundant. Black bear roamed throughout the state with many other species, including wolves, mountain lions, beavers, turkeys. In the early 1600s, though, European settlers started to come in to Connecticut and set up settlements here. The first coming in 1640 were the Dutch traders. They set up semi-permanent settlements here. Then a little later on, 1633-34, we had settlers previously from Massachusetts coming down here and setting up really the first permanent settlements in Windsor and Wethersfield. Now, most of these settlers were farmers. So agriculture was how they made a living, fed their families. So they needed to clear the land for this agriculture, basically using hand tools, animal power, and a lot of hard work. They started to clear a lot of the forests that we have here for their crops and their livestock. At this time, wood was also the primary source of fuel. The average family burned about 12 cords of wood a year, heating and cooking. Wood was also the primary building material for things like buildings, fences, and some transportation wagons. It was also essential in the shipbuilding industry. Also in core wood was was needed for the blast furnaces, for the coal mines, the iron mines that they had here in Connecticut to melt down the iron ore. Now, with the clearing of all this land for agriculture, with the clearing for it for the needs of wood, many of our native species were pushed out of the state. There was unregulated hunting at the time, and there was also bounties on animals that were thought to be a threat to the settlers, mountain lions, wolves, and bears. And this extirpated many of our native species from the state, completely pushed them out of the state. Here in Connecticut, 1840, the last black bear was killed. Late 1700s saw Connecticut at its peak for agriculture. About 80% of our landscape was agricultural at that time. The 1800s, though, mid to late 1800s, started to see a change. People started leaving the fields and going into the more urban areas because the Industrial Revolution was coming about. In 1825, the Erie Canal opened up, opening up a direct water route from the Atlantic and New York out to the Great Lakes. Now, a lot of this agricultural land was being abandoned. They didn't need it anymore for their living, so once the land was abandoned and no longer being worked, all our forests started to grow back naturally. Plenty of places in Connecticut, if you're walking through the woods, you see stone walls and foundations from our agricultural heritage. But there were continued threats to our forest landscape. The continued harvest for buildings and that type of thing. The chestnut tree blight right before World War I, coming in from Asia, decimated our beautiful American chestnut trees. Just destroyed them in a very short period of time. It was like 7 years or 5 or 7 years. The continued production of charcoal and development, other diseases coming in, the Dutch elm disease, invasive bugs coming in, the woolly adelgin and the emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle. We still have these now. Also, the lack of natural burns. A lot of forests need natural burns in order to reproduce. And we stopped a lot of the natural burns. Also, in 1938, the largest hurricane that ever hit Connecticut's coast took down about 50% of the trees east of the Connecticut River. But things started to change at the turn of the century. Our minds, our thoughts started to change. We no longer used wood for a primary source of fuel. We had moved on to other types of fuels, a lot of the fossil fuels. In 1923, I believe the last iron mine in Connecticut had closed down. But we started to think about natural resources and conserving these for the future. We started forest management in 1903. We brought about game management and environmental management. Today, Connecticut has about 32 state forests, 160,000 managed acres. We have hunting and trapping regulations and wildlife conservations. Today, Connecticut is once again about 55 to 60% forested with our landscape. Now, with the return of the forests, many of our wildlife started to return. As the forests matured and got 60 to 100 years old, a lot of the forests came back. A lot of the wildlife started to come back. Some of the wildlife was reintroduced, like the turkey. Other wildlife came back on its own, like the white-tailed deer. they estimate that in the year 1900, there was only 12 white-tailed deer left in the state. So, but without predators, without the mountain lions, without the wolves, deer made a huge comeback here. After a 100-year absence, the black bear was seen in the northwest corner of the state every now and again, wandering. Usually it was in the springtime. Generally, they believed it was young males looking for territories. But in the 80s, these sightings began to increase. We started to see bears around denning season. We started to see mothers with cubs. This is usually a time where bears aren't doing a lot of traveling. So at this point, they assumed that a bear population was reestablishing in the state. Today, there's over 6,200 reported sightings of black bear in Connecticut. And they believe that their estimated population is probably 700 to 800 now. This is just a timeline a little bit over the last few decades. You can see here in '94, there were 75 reported sightings of bear. And probably most of them were kind of up in this area, the northwest corner area. Down here in 2016, where we had over 6,000. And you can see the bottom number is the different towns, how many different towns. Now, of course, the biggest population is here in the northwest corner. That's where the best habitat is, best bear habitat is. This, again, is just numbers by town. On their website, on the DEP website, where you can actually list if you've seen a bear, report it. They also have what they call it's a rolling year, and this is something you can get from the website, and it says where where bears sightings have been reported. Now, a lot of times people in the areas like here in Litchfield and other areas that have a lot of sightings don't really report the bears too much anymore. It's an everyday occurrence for you guys. So, but as the bears are moving east and south, those areas are starting to report them. This is the DEP website, ct.gov/DEP. It's a great website for information in the state about wildlife, about bears, hunting and trapping regulations, state parks, state forests, etc. Now, black bears require a mature forest with trees, with mature nut trees such as oaks or beech nuts or hazelnuts. Here in Connecticut, about 99% of our black bears are actually black. Black bears come in many different colors, including dark brown, light brown, tan, blonde, gray, and even white. Over in the British Columbia area, there is a subspecies of American black bear called the commodity bear or the spirit bear, and this is actually a white black bear. It's not albino. It's actually what they call white phase. It does have pigment, but it's actually a white black bear. But it just seems to be in that area. 1 out of every 10 of the coyote bears is born white. The rest are black or brown or that type of thing. But 1 out of every 10 is white. Black bears, generally adult males, are about 150 to 400 pounds. Adult females are about 110 to 250 pounds. The largest bears ever handled in Connecticut, there were two males, about 600 pounds each. One was in Bloomfield, the other in Hartland. The largest black bears on record, there was one in Minnesota recorded at 878 pounds. One in North Carolina recorded at 880 pounds. And one in Nova Scotia recorded at 903 pounds. And that's huge for black bears. Now they have a good eyesight and good hearing. Their eyesight's actually color. They have color vision like we do. But their sense of smell is thought to be one of the best of any of the land animals. Their sense of smell, we have a sense of smell that is very poor compared to a lot of the animals. Dogs have a sense of smell about 1,000 times better than us. Well, bears, they estimate that bears have a sense of smell about 7 times better than a bloodhound. Bears have an annual, yearly cycle that they go through. Normal activity is usually mid-spring into late summer. This is when they're mating. This is when they're raising their cubs. Usually they're trying to get about 8,000 calories a day to help keep them going. As summer starts to come to a close, they go into a hyperphagia state. This is sort of a pig out, a Mardi Gras for them. They need to get weight on before the winter so they can hibernate. They are looking for 23,000 calories a day. That's why they're doing a lot of moving and they're eating a lot of the fruits of the summer, the late fruits and the nuts. Then as the fall starts to wean away, they go into a fall transition. This is where they actually really stop eating. They start slowing down. It's actual physical change. Their metabolism is actually starting to slow down. And they're looking for a place to den for the winter. Usually they'll find an area where they're going to den, and they do certain things like raking around that area. And that really says, this is where I'm probably going to stay for the winter. Of course, as winter comes in, they go into their sleep state, their hibernation, for a couple of months, again, depending on where they are in the country. And then when they come out of hibernation, in usually around mid-March, mid to late March, they go through a couple of weeks that's called like a walking hibernation. It's actually the kind of reverse of the fall transition. Their metabolism is now starting to get going and is gearing up for them to go back into their normal time, their normal activity state. Now, bears weren't considered true hibernators. Something like the chipmunk or the ground squirrel, when they hibernate, their body temperature and their heart rate drops significantly. Their body temperature can drop below freezing, and when they're in that hibernation state, they're basically almost frozen. They can't function at all. But they need to get themselves up every couple of weeks to eat or drink or pass weights to get that, and then they go back into their hibernation state. Now, when bears go into their denning state or their sleep state for the winter, they can be in this sleep state for anywhere from 2 to 7 months. Again, depending on where they are in the country and the climate. During this time, they don't have to eat, they don't have to drink, and they don't have to pass any waste. They can go for that entire time without doing any of those things. That's not to say that they always do, but they can go for that time without it. They have a very thick coat, which provides them with insulation, so there's very little heat loss. Their heart rate goes down to about maybe 10 beats per minute, and their respiration slows down. But their body temperature stays relatively high. It stays within about 12 degrees of their active rates, usually around 84, 85 degrees. And because of this is why they weren't considered true hibernators, because that drop in body temperature is one of the things that they use to do that. Well, like I said, bears are actually highly efficient hibernators. They seem to be able to do this, this hibernating, this sleeping during the winter actually a little better. Now, some biologists consider that they are hibernators now, a little redefined. Some still won't let that go. Now, hibernation is a mechanism to conserve energy during times of little or no food. And bears, like I said, are very well at this. They have some physiologies that are amazing. During hibernation, they burn about 4,000 calories a day. They're living off their fat, and this is supplying them with hydration and nutrition. But they're living off 100% off fat, so their cholesterol is actually about twice what it is during their active rate. They also produce a bile juice. It's produced in the liver, it's stored in the gallbladder. It's called ursodeoxycholic acid. And what this does is, in the gallbladder, this helps break down the cholesterol. And in this way, they don't get the cholesterol gallstones. They don't have signs of heart disease, of plaque in the arteries. They don't show those kind of symptoms that humans do. Their kidney functions will decrease. They go down to about 25% usage. They actually take the urea and recycle it. And doing this, it creates amino acids which help keep and produce proteins which help keep their muscles strong and their organ tissue strong. We know as humans, it doesn't take as long of inactivity for our muscles to break down and just start to go very soft. Bears, they can sleep for 7 months and their muscle tissue does not break down. And same thing with their bones. Their bones stay strong. They have a regulatory substance which helps keep their bones strong. It's another thing with humans. Our bones actually start to lose mass when we don't have a lot of activity. Now, all these things are things that our medical community is actually looking at. Things that might help humans in the future. If we can figure out how to synthesize or do some of these things, then we might be able to help people with things like osteoporosis, kidney disease, terminal illnesses, any of those who can't get around, they're disabled or incapacitated. And these are things that hopefully our medical community is going to learn from bears. And some of the things like the ursodeoxycholic acid has been synthesized, I think using cow bile. And it's on the market, so some of you probably have heard of it. So it's like an ursidol. Bears here in Connecticut usually hibernate from about mid-November to about mid-March. They'll go out and they look for their dens or where they're going to sleep for the winter. Now this might be the typical den that you think of when you think about bears hibernating for the winter, in children's literature, the cave here. But actually, bears will use a lot of different things. And here in the Northeast, they seem to like things like stick piles or leaf piles. They like dugout dens sometimes. They'll use old fox dens. They'll dig those out a little bit. Hollow trees, hollow logs. This guy, you can see, is kind of right out in the open. The snow is falling on him. There's like a tree that fell down and just scrunched up against that, and that's where he's hibernating for the winter. This is a very interesting den, if you want to call it. There's a couple of trees there. So it's in a swamp, and what the bear has done is she's raked up all the swamp grass as it died and made this huge nest. It looks like a huge bird's nest. And there, right on top, she was hibernating for that winter, and she had 4 cubs. So you can see many different den types. And of course, Some do get in trouble because they end up under people's porches or decks, those kind of things. So anywhere where they can get a little bit of protection. Now in spring, of course, they're going to be extremely hungry when they come out of hibernation. So one of the first places they head for is the wetlands, because that's one of the places that green up quickly. In our wetlands here, we have skunk cabbage, and that's part of their early spring diet. Excuse me. They eat that, and it helps them start to get their systems going. Remember, there hasn't been anything really going through their digestive systems for a few months. Now, bears are omnivores. They like to eat both vegetation and meat. Most of the species, with the exception of the polar bear, most of their diet is vegetation. Here are black bears. Their diet is, they like things like soft mass, which are berries and fruits, honey. They love insect larvae. In the fall, that's when they need those acorns, those hickory nuts, beech nuts, to put that weight on for the winter. That's those high calorie things. It's also a time when they do seem to go after a lot of the bird feeders that are filled with the sunflower seeds. Again, that's protein for them. Here in Connecticut, mating season is usually June and July. That's generally the only time you see adult bears together. Adult bears don't travel in packs. They're more of a solitary animal. Younger bears, juveniles, sometimes will be seen together, traveling together, but adults usually don't. Now there's another interesting thing. When the bears mate in June or July, even if the female gets fertilized eggs, those eggs don't start developing at that point. She has something what they call a delayed implantation. The fertilized egg just kind of hangs there in a static state. She has to gain enough weight during the summer and the fall months so she can sustain that pregnancy. She needs to get at least to about 150, 160 pounds. So she can sustain that pregnancy because she's going to have those babies usually during hibernation in January and February, early February. So if she gets that weight on, in the fall, around the time that she's, late fall, she's going to go into hibernation, those embryos now attach to her uterine wall and start developing. And then the cubs are born about 8 weeks, 2 months later, in, like I said, mid-January and early February. Now, when cubs are born, they're extremely helpless. They've really only been developing for about 2 months. Their eyes are still closed, their ears are pinned, they have no teeth, very, very little fur on them. So they're quite helpless. So basically, after mom gives birth, and unfortunately, even though there's a lot of jokes, mom is awake during the births. But it's probably a little easier. These cubs, when they're born, are about 12 ounces, so they're pretty small. But then what she'll do is she'll gather the cubs up, and she'll gather them to her stomach, to her chest area, where they can nurse. And she kind of curls around them and keeps them warm. Now the cubs will just basically attach to mom and just start nursing. Bears' milk is very high in fat content. It can be 25 to 40% fat content. So these little bears, they're going to be nursing for a couple of months, and when they come out of hibernation in the spring, they're probably going to be 5-7 pounds. Now, the cubs usually stay with their moms for about 17 months, all the way through that first year. Then they'll den with mom that next fall, and spend the winter with her. And in the spring they come out, they're now yearlings, and they'll hang out with mom for a little while, but then around May or something, they have what they call a family dispersal, and mom kind of pushes the cubs away, kind of makes them go off and find their own territory. A lot of times this is when you will see the juveniles traveling together, but for a little while. But then of course, female bears are able to stay closer in the area. They're able to stay closer to their mother's territory, whereas males, of course, they're going to have to travel a little further. And that's often when they get themselves in trouble, because they got to travel and they end up in places, you know, downtown West Haven or something, up a tree, and they don't mean any harm, but they get themselves in a lot of trouble during that springtime. Now, mom has to get rid of these cubs because she needs to mate again in the spring. Now, black bears usually only mate every 2 years, and because she raises the cubs for 1 year and then she'll mate again that following year. She won't mate when she has the cubs or the yearlings with her. A lot of times it's basically safety for them, because the males, when they want to mate her, will go after her yearlings. Now, female bears start to breed about age 3 or 4, males about 4 or 5. Again, it depends on the area where they are, the food availability. Females can breed up into their 20s. I think the oldest breeding known bear in the wild to have cubs was, I think, 28 at this point. So bears can actually live to about 20-25 years in the wild. In captivity, they've lived up to 40. And I think, I'm trying to think, the oldest bear was, I think, close to 40 in the wild. I think it was in New York. There was a bear that was harvested, and they believed it was about 40 years old. Now, of course, here in Connecticut, we have a rising number of bears, and really, us in Connecticut, we haven't really had to think about having bears as our neighbors for a very long time, for most of our lifetime. So we may not be always the best neighbors for bears. So there are a lot of complaints. We're kind of clashing with them a bit. Here in the state, this is usually where the most of the problems are. That area, even though there's usually more bears up here, this is where there's more people and bears. And that's where a lot of the problems today are occurring. There's many different management techniques that biologists use. Of course, one is trap and removal, relocate, or euthanize, which is not a really great management technique. Besides being very expensive and time-consuming, it also isn't very effective. You move a bear 200 miles away, and sometimes it returns actually back to your area. And if it happens to be a bear that's causing a problem, you don't really want to take it from this neighborhood and put it in somebody else's neighborhood. So, not the best management. They do use averse conditioning. This is where they condition the bear to associate humans with a really bad experience. Sometimes they'll live trap a bear if it's causing a problem somewhere, and then they haze it. They'll use loud noises or bright lights. They'll maybe use pepper spray, something so they're going to associate humans with a really bad experience. Some areas this does work very well. Other areas not as much, but they have had some good success with this. Of course, studies and research. This is something that we need to do, because that way, like I said, we understand them a little bit. We learn about their behavior and, of course, their population and their movements. Habitat protection, it's important for all of us. And, of course, public education, passing on what the researchers do find. Here in Connecticut, they are doing a research project. They started in 2002, live trapping bears and anesthetizing them, and then collecting data and recording the data on them, weights and measurements. And here what they're doing is they examine teeth. A lot of times teeth can give you an idea about the health of an animal, their gums and their teeth. But in bears also, there's a tooth that's right here behind the canine. It's one of the premolars, and they sometimes will extract that tooth, they take it out, and they send it to a lab over in Montana who slices it really thin, puts it on a slide and puts a little stain on it so you can see it. Then you can see what they call cementum annuli. It's like the growth rings in a tree. And usually this is a lot of ways how they do aged bears. They do collect these teeth. Now this tooth was actually from a bear. She was a wild bear. She was part of a study. It was taken after she had died. She died about age 27. And now you can see where these thin lines are here. That's where she is lactating. That's where she's milking her cubs, and during the hibernation time. So now one thing you can see from this is that this bear didn't have a successful litter till she was about 10 years old, because it didn't show that she was nursing up to that. But after that, she had a successful litter every other year till she was about 26. They also do tagging and collaring of the bears. Any bear in the state that's handled will get 2 ear tags in the ear. They're plastic tags, and of course sometimes they break off, so sometimes you might only see one. And they put identification numbers on them. Then some of the bears are fitted with radio collars, and then these particular bears become part of the study ongoing, where the biologists can track these bears through periods of their life, not just one shot and then maybe never seeing that bear again. These bears can be followed, and the biologists can see what goes on during their lifetime. Now, all of the bears that are collared here in Connecticut are female. I believe they all have GPS collars now. I'm not sure. They used to use radio telemetry collars, which didn't give as much data, but now with the GPS collars, they get a lot of data. All of them are female, and I think there's like 30, 35 bears that they have collared. Now, during the winter, the biologists will go out and they track these bears to where they're hibernating, these bears with the collars on, and they go to their dens, and of course anesthetize them again, and then once they're asleep, they kind of pull them out, or depending on where they are, and they again process them. They record the weight and the length and the measurements of the bear. They again check the teeth, see if their gums seem healthy. They record all this information. They check to see if the female had cubs that year, and they'll record it. And the cubs do get a chip. They don't get ear tags. They're too small for that, but they do get chips. And if it was recorded that they had cubs the year before, they check to see, because the yearling should be hibernating with her this winter, and that way they get an idea of what the cub survival rate is through that first year. And actually in Connecticut it's extremely high. It's 75 to 85% usually. We conduct studies, again, to gain information, to understand about something that we don't know about, something that's different. Having a better understanding can help us develop better management programs and figure out, why is this bear causing a problem at my house? A lot of the behaviors that we've heard throughout 100 years of how bears act and how they're going to act during these times, that's all been assumed behavior. It hasn't really been studied and verified. Now, though, in the last several decades, they've been doing behavioral studies, and they find that some of the bears, some of the things that we thought about them, isn't actually the way that they will act. And that not all bear species act the same. A black bear could act very different than a brown bear or a polar bear. So these behavioral studies have helped us out a lot. Like I said, they've helped us maybe to understand how a bear might act in certain circumstances. Now, black bears, they're actually growing up or evolving, really were a shy species. They were timid, and they really didn't want to be around, certainly around humans, but they were around a lot of other large predators. Of course, we need to respect them, not fear them, as we do with most wildlife. They're actually a very curious creature, and they have a high intelligence. Their intelligence can be almost as high as primates, some of the biologists have ranked them. Wonderful tree climbers. They can climb a tree faster than we can run on the ground. And once they're in the trees, they're extremely comfortable. Black bears love to be in the trees. They're comfortable up there. They can hang up there for hours. If it happens to be the fall, they can just hang up there and just start pulling acorns off the oak trees and just munching for hours. A lot of people, one of the things that I hear sometimes is that, oh, well, if a bear's chasing you, run downhill because they're clumsy. That is not true. You look at a bear and they look like they're kind of fat, kind of chubby, which is usually mostly their hair, and they kind of look a little pigeon-toed. They walk pigeon-toed, so that you think that, oh, they're just lumbering along. They're kind of uncoordinated. But bears are extremely coordinated and extremely agile, and they're also very quick on the ground. They can run up to 30 miles an hour in short bursts. Their claws, you just get a little bit idea of what their claws look like. These claws, they're very sharp, but they're not razor sharp to hold prey, as maybe a feline's might be. These claws are meant for digging, for tearing apart rotten logs to get at bugs, for climbing. It's one of the reasons that they climb so well. Here in North America, since the year 1900, there have been 66 killings of humans by black bears in the wild. Statistically, this works out to about 1 out of every 1 million black bears will kill a human, compared to 1 out of every 17,000 humans commits homicide. One of the things you also hear is about, with cubs and how mother bears protect their cubs. Now, if you're in an area where there's grizzly and brown bears, they are very protective mothers, and it's based on where they evolved. So they are very protective. But black bears, when they evolve in forest areas with, like I said, a lot of other larger predators. And the way that they protected themselves was to run into the forest and climb a tree, because the larger predators were too heavy, they couldn't come up after them. And this, over time, has been the way that they teach their cubs and they protect their cubs. Usually after they come out of hibernation in the spring, they'll set up what they call like a day bed, maybe at the base of a tree, something like a pine, something that's easy for the cubs to climb up. And she teaches them, this is what you do when you're afraid. Some things, if you are in an area with bears, if you like to go to areas with bears, recreate in those areas, and you don't want to have a real bad experience, just a couple of things to remember. Always keep your campsites clean if you're camping. Store food properly. Don't leave it around the campsite or somewhere that's easy for the bears to get to. Dispose of your waste, your garbage, put that away properly. If you're on a campground, a lot of times they have those big green dumpster type things that you can put it in. And don't keep anything in your tent that will attract the bears. Again, basically, bears are going to be attracted to where they think they can get food. And that's why you want to keep everything clean so they won't think that they can get food from you. If you're hiking in the woods, if possible, stay in groups, hiking groups. There is safety in numbers of these killings in the wild with black bears killing humans. Those 66, all of them were either a single person or two people together. And none of them had any type of deterrent with them. Stay alert and aware of what's around you. You always want to be aware of what's around you, what's happening. If you walk with your dog, keep your dog on a leash for the dog's safety. The dog is naturally going to want to protect you. If it sees a bear, it's going to go after that bear. And that bear, if the dog's going after it, is going to want to naturally protect itself. And it might swat at the dog, whatever, and hurt the dog. So for the dog's safety, keep it on a leash. And carry a deterrent. If you're in an area where you're going to be with bears, carry some kind of bear deterrent. The easiest thing is pepper spray. Pepper spray always seems to work. And if you're in areas with black bears, you can get the little pepper sprays that they have at Cabela's or Bass Shop or whatever. They sell these big cans of pepper spray in the catalog. Those are really more if you're in an area where there's, the larger brown bears and that type of stuff. But if you're here, just carry a little thing of pepper spray. You clip it on your, on your belt or your pocket or something. And that's really all you're going to need to protect yourself. You do have to make sure that the type of pepper spray that you buy does stream, it doesn't fog. You don't want the stuff that fogs, you want the stuff that streams, and then it's got to stream at least 10 to 15 feet. So you can look for bear signs, scat, overturn rocks and logs. If the ground is soft or there's snow, you might see bear tracks. Remember, bears have 5 toes like we do. Bite marks, scratch marks on trees. Sometimes hair rubbed up on trees. In bear encounters, if bears are startled, they can appear to become aggressive. One of the behaviors that generally happens with bears, if they're surprised and you end up being too close, is they'll start this huffing where they expel air. They're huffing. They're slapping the ground. They sometimes they chatter their teeth. It's called jaw popping, where they're clacking their teeth together. Sometimes they're doing these little hops up and down, or they actually do what they call a bluff charge, and they look like they're starting to go towards you. Now, this is not a sign of aggression, that the bear is becoming aggressive. It's a sign of fear, that the bear is afraid. And it would rather not have anything to do with you. So it's not what the bear is going to do when it wants to attack you. But in that circumstance, it is a warning. It's sort of saying, back up, increase your distance from me, remove yourself from my space. So that's basically what you would do if you see this particular behavior. Usually it happens when you're way too close. Now, if you do see a bear off in the distance, you're hiking and you see a bear down the trail or something, best thing to do again is give it a wide space. stay about, 50, 75 yards away from the bear. If it's eating, if it happens to be August and they're eating off a blueberry bush or something, and you want to watch them, great, just like I said, keep an eye on them and make sure that you keep your distance. You also might want to decide that you do want to either go back the way you came or go around and give them a wide berth. If it happens to be in an area where you're not into watching wildlife at that point, the best thing to do is hopefully get to safety, get inside a car, get inside a building. That's the best thing you can do. A lot of people say, well, you got to make sure you don't run. Well, actually there have been reactions of every type that bears have done, humans have done every type of reaction when they've spotted a bear. And none of the studies really show that running away is going to increase the chance of the bear chasing you. Like I said, people say, well, it'll trigger the chase response. Well, bears usually don't really chase down their prey, not black bears. They don't chase down their prey, so there's really nothing there to trigger. That's not saying that you have to run away, but you can certainly move quickly if you feel that you don't want to be anywhere where there's a bear in the area. When bears approach, again, different ideas. When I was younger, I remember them always saying, if a bear is approaching you, you want to play dead. Well, that is good advice if you're in an area, like I said, with the brown bears or the grizzly bears. Where they evolved was a more open area, and of course there were some of the larger predators, so climbing up a tree wasn't a good way to protect themselves. The way they protected themselves was to stand their ground and to fight. So, and they do this especially if they do have cubs with them. So, so if, let's say you're in an area where there's brown bears and for some reason a brown bear is approaching you, that's when you want to play dead. You want to get down on the ground, curl up in a little ball, protect as much of you as you can, and don't move, don't make noise. This signals to the bear that, oh, you're not a threat. And this is, again, the best approach when a brown bear is approaching you. Of course, if you have the pepper spray, use that over the playing dead. But now on the other side of the coin, we have the black bear. Black bears sometimes approach humans. Usually, there's two reasons kind of why they approach. Most of the times I've seen it, them approach humans, it's because they're young and stupid. It's that curiosity that has gotten to them. And once they get towards the human, they're not really sure what to do, and sometimes it ends very badly for them. But most of that time, you can really just startle the bear off. Now, very, very rare occasions, it has been recorded that black bears do approach humans in a predatory way. They're looking at the humans as if they're food. And like I said, this is very, very rare, and it's usually always like in remote areas, back countries, that type of thing, where they're not used to seeing humans. Of course, this is not the time you want to play dead. But again, like I said, it's very, very rare, and most biologists that have been in the field for years have never seen that type of thing. But in that case, and it's not going to be the bear that was slapping the ground or huffing or making noise. It's going to be a very definite approach, a very purposeful approach. It's going to be quiet, its eyes are going to be on you, and it's going to be a purposeful approach, a stalking type approach. So, and again, use your pepper spray if you have it, hopefully. In that situation though, you do need to frighten the bear off. And they say the best thing to do is mimic bear behavior, show the dominance. And again, keep direct eye contact, because that shows your dominance. And I've heard and a lot of times that they say don't look at the bear, but some of the best biologists say keep eye contact, stomp on the ground, you know, yell at them in a low assertive type of voice. Anything that you can do to chase that bear away, pick up sticks, pick up rocks, that type of thing. Most of the time, this is going to scare the bear away. You're not going to have a problem. And like it's at the bottom there, it says always allow for the bear to have an escape route. Make sure it can get away from you. And of course, use your pepper spray. Aim for the nose. Aim for the nose. And that's the best thing that you can do. Every now and again, there is actual physical contact. Again, it's with a black bear, you're going to have to fight that. Again, very, very rare occasions, but that's what you need to do. And again, it doesn't happen with the bears you see wandering around your neighborhood, or even in the forests here in Connecticut. These are usually way in backcountry areas where the bears aren't used to seeing humans. This again is something that Hollywood tells us that a bear does right before it attacks. Gets up on its hind legs and starts waving its arms, or its front legs, and opening its jaw, baring its teeth, usually growling. But again, that's theater, that's Hollywood. Bears aren't going to attack when they're in this position. It would be like us attacking from being on our all fours. Usually when a bear's doing this, they're trying to get a better look at something or a better sniff of something. Mm-hmm. It's usually, I mean, if you look at this bear, his face is curious. It's definitely not aggression or anger or fear. Now, in your areas around your home, again, the most important thing, you don't want to attract the bears. Now, bears are around, and they may be walking through the neighborhood, so they may just be coming through. But don't give them anything don't give them any reason to stay. Make sure they don't get the reward. So don't let them get to your garbage cans. Keep those safe, keep them clean so the smell doesn't attract them. If you're composting, don't put something on the compost pile that's going to attract the bears. In your backyard, again, your grills, keep those clean and stored if possible. I know a lot of people can't store them every time. Bird food, bird feeders, #1 problem throughout the country of what bear problems are. Like I said, the bears don't know it's food for the birds and it's not food for them. They just know it's protein and food. Don't let them have that reward. They say, the state suggests if you do want to feed the birds, do it during the time that bears are supposed to be in hibernation during November, December, January, and February. If you still want to feed the birds during the year, and you want to take your chances, attracting that bear into your neighborhood, don't put your feeders out until after sunrise. Bring them in before sunset, because even though bears aren't nocturnal like many other species, they have a tendency to feed at dawn and dusk, and at night it's a safer time. Electric fences, livestock, fruit trees and bushes, beehives. They're using now electric fences, the same kind we've always used around the cow pastures and the horse pastures, except they're a lot more efficient now. Some of them are solar, but there's certain ones that they have, and they explain what you need to do to prevent the bears from coming in. I know a lot of the beekeepers have told me they usually bait the wires so that the bear will always, they put some honey or something on the wire so the bear will go for that and get a good zap in their nose and their mouth. And that, again, is a deterrent. they've had good success with it. So, now living together with wildlife, it is possible. As humans, like I said, we haven't had to worry about being neighbors with these big black guys for a long time. And we might have to just think a little bit about how we do things. I mean, when I was a kid, you didn't see deer, you didn't see hawks. The worst thing you had to worry about was the raccoons getting in the garbage can and messing with the corn. Take some of the things, hopefully, that I said, and basically the bottom line is don't attract them into the area where you are. Don't attract them to your home, don't attract them to where you're camping. And if you're not in an area where you're controlling it, like out in the woods, that type of thing, or camping, and you're not controlling what the people around you are doing, make sure you have that deterrent. And make sure your area is clean. So you're not attracting them and you're not giving them a reward. I say it's our responsibility because supposedly we are the smarter of the species. And it does, it's not a lot of change. It's just a little way of thinking about things. So it's not a lot of change. It's not, you don't have to change your whole life. Again, bottom line, don't attract them. Don't attract them to your areas. And it makes it easier for coexisting. The bear population in Connecticut is growing, and it probably will continue to grow for at least a while. We do have great habitat here, so. Like I said, the thing to go away with is don't attract the bears. Questions? Yes.
You mentioned black bears hibernating for 3-4 months of the year. We're seeing walking around now.
Mm-hmm.
How do we read that?
Well, bears will hibernate for that, but even though we've always thought that bears, they go into their hibernation state and they stay there and they don't come out, it's not true. Bears will, they'll sleep for a while, and on nicer days, like maybe work out warm or something like that, or they wake up and they go out and they see that there's snow there. They might, lick a little bit of the snow to get some hydration, that type of thing. They do actually pass some waste now and again, but they don't sleep completely. Bears that have not prepared as well for hibernation, usually the younger bears that may not have gotten enough fat on them, they've just gotten enough. Those bears will have a tendency more to hibernate and not move for the entire time they're hibernating. They need to conserve that energy. But if the bears have gained enough weight, they don't need to conserve the energy as much. So they can come out and then go back. And of course, our weather this year has been absolutely nuts. August was November and October was August, and so I know my plants are confused, so I'm sure some of the animals are confused.
If we're seeing a bear walking around now, and there are 2 on our hill,
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't be concerned that there's an issue or a problem with these bears, that is not outside their norms?
It should be outside their norms, but they may be looking for food. So obviously in your neighborhood you wouldn't want to feed the birds during this time. But for the most part, it shouldn't be, but it's constant all the time. Like you even when we had -5 or whatever.
I've got tracks from just the last 2 days on Front Road.
Okay. That I can't say 100% that I would know that there's not a problem with the bears. I do know that this past fall, we didn't have really good acorn crops. They were lean. And maybe some of the bears, and this is just what I'm guessing, maybe some of the bears didn't gain enough weight, and they're still trying to find some out there, and they're not hibernating. Usually bears that do that aren't even going to make it through the winter. I mean, you can add, if you are concerned, you can ask the state, give a call to the biologist in the state and say, what do you think is the issue here? Because usually they're not around all winter unless it's like super, super warm. I know we've had some super warm winters and there's still acorns around and very little snow, that type, but that's not this winter. But I know the weather has been very strange. I don't know if it messes them up. Over there, in the back.
I'm interested in the ecological roles of bears. So I'm, in the sort of biodiversity spectrum, what are they doing? What part are they playing?
I'm not quite sure I understand. I mean, are you looking for what purpose they have?
Yeah.
And, some of their purposes, they are considered seed spreaders. Some people just consider that they make the world better, just having them there. Here in Connecticut, our normal, or what our old environment was, we had the bears, we had the wolves, we had the mountain lions. Those are the predators, the top predators. So, of course, the bear is much lower than those. As far as what they do environmentally, they don't really destroy anything like some of the deer are doing. Their main purpose, I don't really know. I mean, I don't know why we're here. So.
Yeah, but you know how we function in the environment, so I was wondering how they function. Yeah, never mind. It's okay.
But no, I'm not. That's fine if I don't understand the question. But I mean, they do very well. Black bears are what's the word I'm looking for? Adaptive. They're very adaptive, and that's why the black bears of all the bear species are doing the best, because they have been able to live within human ranges more than a lot of the other bears. I don't know if that helps. So, yes.
Is it true that if you have a bell or you make noises or you're singing or something when you're walking around, is that a deterrent? That's something that they say, and again, most bears would rather avoid us, but their number one priority is food. So if they hear us coming, but they don't think they can get food from the area where we are, that noise will probably send them off in the other direction. Again, it all depends on what kind of rewards they've gotten in the area where we are. But yeah, even loud screaming, like if the bears are there, not walking around the woods screaming. But they say talking, the bear bells, just making some kind of noise, singing, that type of thing, usually is a deterrent. It's not going to be as much of a deterrent as a determined bear that's trying to get food from you. So. What are some good songs?
On top of Old Smoky? I don't know. Yes.
What kind of damage does the pepper spray do to the bear?
It's temporary. It is temporary. It's not permanent, which is why a lot of the biologists suggest it. For the most part, it's not supposed to be permanent. Usually, it's made out of like a cayenne pepper.
Did you see people, getting sprayed with it, and what the reaction? People, I mean, they can't wash their eyes out.
Right, but it will wear off. It's not going to wear off quickly, but it's going to wear off. And like I said, it's not supposed to cause permanent damage, but
on the other side, you can, if a bear is causing a problem
Right.
and you spray that, okay, he's gonna hurt for a couple of days, he's gonna be, not feeling really good. But if for some reason he does approach you, contact you, make contact with you,
Yes,
then that bear has to be destroyed by, whoever the local wildlife people are. So that's kind of the law wherever if the bear makes contact, that's the only shot he gets. So,
Thank you.
yes.
So I'm here because I'm trying to figure out if I do need to call the state. I haven't seen my bear since December 17th of 2017 and 2016. He was on the property late December 14th. But the behavior you described that normally occurs at the end of the summer, I see right before. I don't see him again until the spring. And this year he became very aggressive and tried to take down the front door in the middle of the night and successfully destroyed my storm door.
Wow.
So I don't know if that's behavior because he's looking for food right before he goes into hibernation, or...
Well, like I said, this year, there's gonna be a lot of problems. You're gonna hear in the news, chances are you're gonna hear in the news that there's a lot of problems. And that's not something a bear should be doing. He shouldn't be, wrecking anything in your property. But with that mash pit, without the nuts in the fall to help them prepare. And it's not just the bears, it's the deer, the turkey, the squirrels. They all really rely on those fall nuts. And if a bear is hungry, again, he could do destructive things like that. You said you haven't seen him, so he probably did go into hibernation. But again, when they come out of hibernation in the spring, a lot of times there's leftover acorns and they can graze on that. I doubt it. I mean, in my area, there's very few. I mean, I usually in my yard, I'm walking and slipping on them and that kind of thing. I barely saw any this year. So it's just something that you have to think about, be a little more in tune that there's probably going to be problems this spring and into the summer. If the bear does anything anywhere near that, you need to call the state. So, but that's not normal behavior. So, but like I said, they're off. The weather has been crazy, and so there's a question.
What about a mother bear with cubs? I've been told they're the most dangerous.
If they're brown bears, yes.
Not with black bears?
For the most part, not so much. Really, what you'll see is the mother and the cubs usually running off and climbing trees. And she's not like a brown bear usually where she stands and protects, stands her ground and protects kind of thing, so, yes.
I've heard about bears on the west coast, living off of salmon and from the salmon spawning. Does that have any effect on is there anything like that for the bears here in New England, or is there
Well, a lot of the bears that you hear with around like at Brook Falls and stuff in Alaska, and usually that's the brown bears. And I don't know if you've ever watched those nature shows. They talk about the pecking order, and the most dominant bears get the best spots to get the salmon, and then from there it's the least dominant brown bears, and then the black bears are kind of way off because there's no dominance against the black bears. Here we really don't have that kind of thing that I know of. I mean, we do stock our ponds and our rivers, but for the most part, I've never really heard of bears in Connecticut going down to the Farmington and grabbing whatever runs in the Farmington, I used to kayak on the Farmington all the time, and I never saw bears around there. So, but they also say that that's one of the reasons that the Alaskan bears are larger. Grizzly bears are actually more inland brown bears, and they're actually smaller. It's those Alaskan bears that get the animal protein. Their families have been developing on animal protein, and that supposedly would make them bigger. The same thing with the polar bears, is most of their diet is also animal protein. Yes?
According, though, to the Great Mountain Forest, our black bears are starting to eat baby deer, which are certainly protein.
What was the question?
And consequently, the deer population is diminishing.
That's actually normal, in not just Connecticut bears, but bears in the spring, well, deer in the spring, when mothers have their fawns, a lot of times they leave their fawns in the forest because the fawns at that point don't have, they don't have as much of a scent, and it's better for mom to leave them there while they go off and get food or whatever. That's common. If a bear does come upon that, it's going to take the opportunity, take the fall. A number of years ago, there was a story in the Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee where a number of visitors saw a young bear take a fawn, and they attacked the young bear to get the fawn away from it, you know. So that, I mean, that is a natural thing.
So I understand
I don't think it's going to affect the deer population that dramatically in Connecticut. This will probably be a better, I don't know, maybe this past fall was probably a better hunting season, again, because the deer didn't have all the natural food and they were probably moving more. Because I know I've had hunters say, well, all the deer are gone. Well, usually those are on in the years that there's such an abundance that the animals don't have to move very far to eat, and so they're not gonna be seen as much. But we could actually probably afford natural control of the deer here. As much as I hate to say that, but.
Do they make a new den every year, or do they return?
Here in Connecticut, from what I understand, is they actually get a new den, or close to the area. They very seldom reuse that same den. Yes.
What's the territory that a bear has in terms of range? Is it 50 miles, 100 miles? You said everybody has their own territory.
Right. The females here in Connecticut usually they say 5 to 12 square miles. Males are a little bigger, maybe 25 square miles. But that's here in Connecticut. In other areas, like the Adirondacks, their territories are actually bigger. And they're not exclusive, where they can all overlap. Like females obviously can overlap into the males. And like I said, sometimes the female yearlings will overlap into mom's territory. Sometimes she won't let them, but sometimes she does.
But if a male wanders into someone else's territory, does a fight ensue for territoriality rights?
During breeding season, it probably will for breeding rights. There will be a fight. But like I said, they can even males' territories can overlap. Based on where the females are hanging out. So, yes.
The case recently about I think it was a donkey that was attacked in Kent. What's your explanation on that? Was it strictly for food, or was there something up with that there? Or?
I don't know much about that whole incident, but I'm thinking that it was more of a food. They're looking for food. Usually where we have, the equines and that type of thing, there is grain, and, sweet grain has a nice smell, so it's going to attract the bear. And it basically, in that situation, it was like a turkey shoot. The poor donkeys were they're in their stalls or whatever. They really couldn't get out. So, I don't know if they actually ever captured that bear or not, if they located the bear that did that. But again, in those circumstances, the state probably helped these people maybe set up some electric fencing for protection. I don't know, because I don't know that case that well, but I did hear about it, and it just sounds
So
horrible.
you think the bear was attracted to a scent, and then just because the donkey was there, it attacked the donkey? I mean, is that what you...
Yes, probably. It probably was looking
It
for...
didn't directly go because the donkey was there, you know?
Well, I mean, I don't know if the smell of like horses and donkeys or chickens would attract them. I don't really know if that was, but I know like the sweet grain would attract them, that sweet smell.
Yeah.
So, yes.
In that particular case, the owner shot that bear, according to the paper.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, I
And
didn't
the
know.
bear was a 500-pounder.
So, yeah, it was probably a large male, and he was looking for food. And I don't remember what time of year it was. So it was probably during their hyperphagia time, where he was just trying to get those pounds on. But, and even though we don't have a hunting season in Connecticut, you do have the right to protect your property and your livestock. So in that case where if the landowner shot the bear, it wouldn't be anything against the law. You just had to do it. So, but yeah, that was a terrible, sad story. So, any other questions?
I'm just wondering if there's anything significant that's been learned from the studies they've been doing since they began tagging the bears in Connecticut?
Well, basically, what they're looking for is their again the population and their movements, and looking for their territories and that type of thing. They do have all sorts of papers and stuff. Every once in a while, they'll send me some of the write-ups that they do, but they record the population and the cub survival rate. Then they record the sightings. They record any of the problems that they have, whether it's attacking a vehicle, an attempted home entry, that type of thing. And they put all that together. So, any other questions? Yes.
Well, we saw one last year when we had 4 tags on it. What does that mean?
4.
4, so many years.
Huh. As far as I know, that Connecticut didn't do that, but I mean, I actually haven't talked to the biologist in probably a year. Last year was a bad year for me. But it could also be a bear from another state. It could be a bear that came in from New York or Massachusetts. I mean, I don't know how they tag their bears. So, I could, I'll probably ask. I do have to kind of follow up with the biologist in the state. So. Anything else? Yes.
Do bears like limestone? If we got a bag of limestone,
Like a 40-pound bag.
it was clawed through, do you think they were attracted to it and dragged it?
Huh. A lot of times they say, that helps kill the smells. and
Oh.
stuff. But I've been surprised. Was this last year?
Several years ago.
Yeah, that's
But
something
it
I
was made out of
haven't.
shells though, I think it was like, wasn't it like lobster shell or something weird?
Or maybe crushed seashells.
So maybe that's what it was called.
It was limestone.
I would imagine though that they probably put it through some process that, But yeah, that is odd. I've never heard of that.
Maybe a bear didn't do it.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So, I know I'm having a terrible time with mice in my house this year. It's driving me crazy. I usually don't have the problem, but I've been it's been really annoying. Anything else? Well, thank you all for